Okay, it's recording.
Okay.
All right, so the runtime, right? I posted a link on what we initially implemented.
Okay.
So the way this worked is that design time and runtime, there were separate UIs. For runtime, what the user did is select the runtime model. So this is like, what is their package name? Okay, and they also provided the version. So if you can see here,
You can repeat the last part. I missed it.
they provided the package name, and then they provided the VNF or PNF instance name. Okay. So once I know the instance of the device I'm working on, or the network function, right, and I have the package, I can do different actions to that instance. Okay, using
Is that a manual entry or are we get it from
the package name.
the host name? The host name.
So in here, the user manually entered, but we'll discuss some ideas how we can do this, okay?
Mm-hmm.
All right, so you can see here, they have the package name, instance name. They click on next. They select the mode if it's sync or async. You know, by default, we probably will support async. And then what they did was they selected also the action they want to execute. By selecting the action.
But you're still typing here.
Say it again.
You still enter some field here.
Yeah, because that's the, okay, so hold on one second. Let's see if I can go back. Just click sync, and then they select. Okay. So in here, I don't know, but what we also want the user to do is select the action, okay? Once they select the action, then they can select sync or async mode in the demo. And what happens is that once you select the action, you have to populate some information that is necessary. Because for every action, you know, we have required input parameters.
Yeah,
Yes, those attributes, right?
Yeah.
So we call a backend API, and for that action, we will allow the user to select, basically, provide all the input parameters that are needed in order to execute this specific request. So
these are the same, like the one we have for the action or the function.
Right. So from a backend API for a given action, we'll know all the parameters the user has to enter. We'll give them a form to populate this data. And here was a JSON object, but you know, we can provide a more, like a better form to populate some of the required inputs. I want to say for a given action.
Yeah.
Okay, so he enters the host name in this case. He's gonna submit the request. And for this request, it will go ahead and execute it. And there's two parts to the request, okay? So once you execute it, he clicks on proceed. What happens is that, you know how we have templates, right? In the cases we have templates, the templates plus the parameter data is a complete list. So now you can see the meshed output of that execution, okay? And then there's also parameter data that we resolve using dictionaries, right? And that's going to be within the resource resolution. You see here this tab? Okay. And each of the parameters that we also resolve within the template, you can step through this previous and next button. This is what we also have. Okay. So if you click on next, it's going to show you all the parameters that we have substituted within the variables that we had in the template.
Can you click on it? Okay. Just doing the demo. I'm sorry. Okay.
Can you repeat that again?
I meant that I thought that you are just trying it out, but this is only a video.
This is a video, correct?
Yeah.
Sarah, your voice is breaking up a little bit. Can you repeat that again?
I didn't say anything.
Okay. So let me show you. So they see the configlet. They click on next to view different parameters that we may have. And there's also like an ask me button. So before you deploy configlet, we ask the user, is this configlet valid for deployment? This is like an ask yourself. Once they check it off, then they will click on a config, deploy basically button, deploy the configlet. Okay. So what we did is we did two things. We previewed the configlet that was generated by the runtime, and then by reviewing the configlet and the parameter that was resolved, then we did the ask yourself, and then we did deploy. So that's one
So
deployment.
just asking for manual validation.
It's a manual user validation, yes.
Okay.
So one way to deploy.
But if there anything missing, how can we define it?
The user would look at the configlet and will
Yeah, is there any automatic validation here?
so
If I check the I'm okay with this validation, but there's still something is not there is no validation yet.
So this is one mode of operation, right? The other mode of operation that we can allow the user to deploy the actual configlet, and he can validate it in the router itself or in the device. We can also offer maybe validation services that we can automatically call in the backend to validate the configlet against like a golden config. So those are possible solutions as well. Okay, and so this is what we initially built, and you can also see the deployment status. So our idea is that a device should have a diary of all the configures that have been executed on it. Okay, so we should store for a given request or for a given device, we should have a diary of all the configures, all the requests that hit it. This GUI does not capture that. Okay, but we know that is needed to be executed as well. So you can see the deployment status, you can see the logs as well, and you can also export configlet. Sometimes the users want to export this information.
The logs were the previous deployment status?
The logs, I don't remember what the logs were. It could be backend logs or it could be device logs.
For the current deployment?
It's everything in this implementation is for the current deployment. Okay, so let me, once this is, and you can see this is, I click on resource resolution. In this case, my action had only a variable of host name. So that's why you'll see resource name and resource value of host name here as well, right? But some, actions can have multiple attributes and different value sets, okay? I can even say that probably what's missing here is that the capability I would use, if it's input, if it's, if it's an IPAM system or some other dictionary capability that I use to resolve this value, I think it would be good to have that so that the user can say, understand that these resources are resolved using these different capabilities in the dictionary. and its individual status as well. And here we also allow the user to kind of edit the value if they believe it's not correct. By editing this value, it will also impact the configlet that's generated. So that was the idea that we had. Let me just see what else do we have. Anything else? Okay, so that's what we had for runtime. So the main idea I wanted to kind of express is that for runtime, what in this GUI, you know, we did a good job, but it's not really the full implementation. You know, when we execute workflows for runtime, you know, in this case, we executed only a base configured one action, but you know, a package can have multiple actions. So what we need to allow the user to do is, in this case, the way we selected even like the package is the user had to search a package. Let's say we had a way to start with inventory. So the first thing the user would see is a screen of for a given region, all the devices, and by selecting that device, he also selects the package instance of that device. So like AI data has device information, so we can provide like you know, a map of, let's say, US, right, or a map of Europe, or a map of, you know, Middle East, and the users can see all the different devices within that map that he can configure using CDS. And by selecting the instance inventory itself, he can then select the package that you can execute different actions on. So the question, Sarah, are you clear on that idea itself?
I'm sorry, really, I lost the connection.
Oh.
I don't know where did we stop.
Okay, so I was saying that the way we can, there's different ways to implement this. Okay, the initial implementation is good, but it's not it's not like it's not the best implementation. Okay. The other idea we can use, like in here, we started off with package name and device instance the user provided, but the runtime can be also like a global graph of you know, US or you know, most of the world regions such as you know, Europe or Middle East or Africa, right? And the user for those different regions can then select the device he wants to operate. So what I'm trying to say is that the runtime itself can first kind of show a view of all the device inventory in a you know, geolocation kind of graph. That could be one way to select the specific instance of the device itself. And then once you select that device, because the you know, the users kind of starts with that global map, then selects the, you know, he select the site, and from the site he can select the instance, and for that instance he can also then configure using the CBA package, you know, different capabilities, different actions, I should say. So then we can also allow the user to, like in here, we only allow the user to execute one action. Okay, that was the base config. But what we also would like to do is allow a screen where the user can, you know, execute not just one actions, but maybe a string of actions based on the input that is required for each of those actions. Okay, so that's another capability we would like. So we would like to see a way where we can string actions together and let the runtime UI execute it. And finally, as we execute this, there's two modes of operation. There's zero touch, where the user clicks on execute and everything is executed by the backend systems. And we just display the log status. So the way we want to do it is that every time we execute something on that action, on that VNF instance, we want to make sure we record it, right? And we show a log of all the history of that execution. So what I'm trying to get at is that it should be basically within a diary format itself.
Mm-hmm.
And then and you know that mode is zero touch, right? So it means that we don't do configured previews, we don't do resource resolution previews. We just it would execute all those, you know, resource resolution in the back end, and configures will be then deployed automatically, right? The other
Yeah.
mode of operation is that what we had is that we first allow the user to do a preview, and then you know, and see the resource resolution data, and then you know execute it or deploy the configures using the runtime UI itself for each of the actions.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the idea of runtime that we have for CDS. Any questions?
I think I'll need to review this these steps again. I think I lost something here, but maybe the main idea of having these steps. Is there another step of deployment outside of the designer, or do we need to include it within the designer
So designers only
for the deployment?
with packages, right? Those packages are deployed into the runtime process. The runtime is dealing with execution of those packages across, you know, a specific device instance, or it could be even across multiple devices as well. But you know, let's focus on a specific runtime device instance itself.
Mhm.
And the main idea here is that how do we, first of all, drill down to that specific device instance, right? Using,
Yeah.
let's say, probably a geographical view. That's one idea. The user can also use like hostname, enter the value. That could be an option as well. But I'm just giving you an idea so that we can discuss it and see what the best approach could be.
The host
Hostname
name is
currently
different for.
is available from AI, and we can, you know, present that in a geographical self.
Mhm.
Okay, and then the idea is that once we have that uh, inventory data, we can select that specific device instance, select the package we want to execute, and then
Yeah.
string the set of actions we want to execute for that device. And we allow a zero-touch automation execution, or this, you know, a dry run execution where we do a configured preview and then deployment using the runtime capability.
So the bottom line here is the deployment. The main deployment is based on the CBA packages, and here is based on the device.
And
We have
right, here is
two types of deployment.
here it's basically action execution. It's not even a deployment. It's more about action execution. When we say deployment of configured, you know, you can also say it's an execution of that.
Yeah, I don't see any difference between the deployment and the execution. I see that the deployment is just execute some actions.
Yes.
That's what's confused me here.
Yes. So maybe we shouldn't use the term deployment because that could be a design word, right? We should maybe use execution or process or some other word, right? That means that it's more of a runtime reserved for runtime needs.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. So to sum it up, maybe you can go again, or I think you have you sent me this this link. It describes the steps.
Yes.
Okay, this will be my reference.
Okay, so what we did was a prototype.
Yeah.
It's a good start, but you know, we want to improve the design a bit here.
And this will be another component inside the CDS UI.
It's a UI. It's separate from the designer client, right? It's a runtime.
I mean it's another component like or another module like the dictionary data, or maybe like the package. It's another module.
It could be a completely separate repo itself, okay? Because
Yeah.
it's not part of design at all.
Yeah.
You know, it could be completely, you know, we can incorporate it in our, you can say CDS UI, but it can also be completely separate repo.
Okay, but there is no dependency on the packages here or the actions.
Well, the package have to be deployed before we can execute any runtime. But assuming the packages are deployed,
So it's okay. Yeah. So this is only the execution here is only for the deployed packages.
yes,
There should be a
available execution is only for deployed packages, correct?
okay. Okay, I see it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'll stop the recording.
Okay.